And it's time to talk about AOC and the fact that she has exposed herself as, let's say, somebody who is not very bright. And you might have to say, oh, but that was a long time ago. But right now, I have two questions about this because she said that Venezuela, in a very despective way, she said that Trump shouldn't have done what he did to Venezuela just because Venezuela is below the equator. And I would want to know what did she mean by this. But let's watch the clip. And another clip that her brain just froze, glitched with China's economy. AOC, shout out to Western Lensman, by the way. The U.S. shouldn't engage in actions like the one against Maduro just because Venezuela is below the equator. Venezuela, where I come from, is not below the equator. And even if it was, what do you mean by that?
You know, we look at what happened in Venezuela, for example. It is not a it is not a remark on who Maduro was as a leader. He canceled elections. He was an anti-democratic leader. That doesn't mean that we can kidnap a head of state and engage in acts of war just because the nation is below the equator.
All right. You see that she said that.
And
she got a round of applause because I guess that her audience is as dim-witted as she is. And then I asked the question, legit question, leaving aside the geography fumble that, again, anyone can have. Anyone can have a geography fumble. Not going to blame anyone for that. What do you think AOC implied when she said the words below the equator? As in, what does she imply about countries that are actually below the equator? Got a couple answers here, and I would like to keep an eye on your comments as well. J.E. May, big shout out to J.E. May. She implies all countries below the equator are brown and poor and underdeveloped. Yeah, that's what it how it sounded to me and was offensive. Gabby Siegel, she seems to imply the countries below the equator are lesser. Yes, that's again, that's how it sounded to me. And yes, as JB, that is also right here, one of our mods, applause for her stupidity. Yeah, people applaud stupidity because if they can't tell the difference, I wouldn't say that they're gonna applaud because of the equator thing, but they don't realize what are they really applauding for. And this is also that she says that whiteness is imaginary. Whiteness is imaginary. How does that work? Okay.
There's a very big difference between whiteness and national, like your actual culture, right? Whiteness is an imaginary thing. Being German is real. Being Italian is real. Being English. These are rich cultural heritages that are based on values, and they are so much a part of what make our cultures and our societies what they are.
So yeah, whiteness is imaginary. Whiteness is not real. It's like I remember when I got called like I was a white Latino, and what is that? I don't know if feel offended or what, because being a white Latino, what is that exactly? Also, AOC slams Rubio's. Marco Rubio gave a great speech, by the way. She slams Rubio's pro-West speech and calls for class-based internationalism instead. Class-based? Okay, that sounds very Marxist, in fact.
You are starting to see the ascent of the right, even in places like Munich. Marco Rubio's speech was a pure appeal to Western culture.
And she did the quotation marks with her fingers, as in Western culture is not a thing. You said that, maybe you were doing something else while you were listening to me, But she said Western culture, and she did quotation marks with her fingers, as in Western culture is imaginary as well.
My favorite part was when he said that American cowboys came from Spain.
I thought they came from Winnetou, but
I believe the Mexicans and descendants of African enslaved peoples would like to have a word on that.
Yeah, it's again, it would be really useful. I mean, there are many ways. There's so many ways to look like you know what you're talking about without knowing what you're talking about. And you either know what you're talking about, or you try to pass as somebody who knows what you're talking about. Okay, you have only those two options. The third option is to shut your mouth. Obviously, AOC doesn't have the credentials for the first option, doesn't have the smarts for the second option, and doesn't have the self-awareness to keep her mouth shut. So this is what happens then.
But, I think it's also important to note how thin that foundation is.
It's thin. Maybe it's another foundation where we could talk about her and, well, her IQ baseline.
Culture is changing. Culture always changed. Culture for the entire history of human civilization has been a fluid, evolving thing that is a response to the conditions that we live in. And so they want to take this mantle of culture. At the end of the day, though, it is very thin. And so the response that we have to have is, again, it's material, it's class-based, it's common interest. There was certainly more openness to what I was saying than probably there would be in years past. We can't underestimate the appeal of going back to these well-worn grooves.
I mean, I understand every single word. I understand every single sentence. I kind of understand the meaning of every sentence, but I don't know what she's talking about. That is the exact definition of a word salad. Like, you understand everything that she's saying, but you have no idea what she's talking about. That's when you know it's a word salad. She's trying to pass off as smart, and since the audience, most likely, you have a distributed audience in which half of them are below average, then maybe those are the ones who begin clapping as soon as she... Maybe they clap because she stops talking. Maybe they know more than we do.
A lot of what we talk about when we talk about a class-based internationalist perspective also means ending the hypocrisy towards the global South.
The global South, all right. You were the one dismissing countries below the equator, so I don't know if you thought that that was a win. But the clip that I wanted you to watch, who was really interesting, is the, Larry O'Connor says, this is the Hindenburg crashing into the Titanic at Chernobyl. Well, you have to watch this for yourself. The question and the answer.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is this is, of course, a very long-standing policy of the United States. And I think what we are hoping for is that we want to make sure that we never get to that point. And we want to make sure that we are moving in all of our economic research and our global positions to avoid any such confrontation and for that question to even arise.
What AOC is leaving after that very uncomfortable pause is that, in fact, the act of kidnapping, quote-unquote, Maduro and beginning the normalization of Venezuela as an actual country and not the narco dictatorship and narco tyranny that we wear, is that precisely that is one of the moves that the Trump administration made so that China could not secure the resources in terms of oil to be able to move towards Taiwan. I mean, anyone who has barely been following, maybe passingly, on geopolitics has reached the same conclusion, because it is no secret the relationship in terms of oil between Venezuela, or the corrupt government that is crumbling, thanks to Donald Trump again, and China. And if you sever that relationship, the same way that you have severed that relationship with Cuba, which is of the brink of collapse as well, and you sever that relationship with Russia as well, as in China and Russia no longer see Venezuela as, the value that they used to have, and they no longer have interest in entering a conflict with the United States, and you realize the actual answer to AOC's question is, what Trump did with Venezuela was the right move. Maybe she glitched. I want to give her a pass. I want to believe that she has this just bit of awareness that precisely that was what happened. And saying these words, she had to be really careful to not say anything good about Trump, because that is in her policy. She can't say that Trump has done anything right at all. Doesn't matter what. This is her tragedy. It would be really easier to say, okay, I acknowledge that the fact that what is happening in Venezuela right now will prevent that. No, maybe she can't even make that connection. Maybe she doesn't even read the news. Maybe she doesn't even understand what something about geopolitics pops up on her timeline. And still, you remember, if Jasmine Crockett is a representative, if Ilskam Omar is a representative, then, well, that's why AOC has her seat. That's what you can be in America. You can be a total moron, a total retard, and still be in the House of Representatives. That's great. Brandon Straka, AOC, what we are seeking is a return to a rules-based order that eliminates the hypocrisies around when too often in the West we look the other way for inconvenient populations and act out these paradoxes. What?
I think what
I need to watch this.
we identify is that in a rules-based order, hypocrisy is vulnerability. And so I think what we are seeking is a return to a rules-based order that eliminates the hypocrisies around when too often in the West we look the other way for inconvenient populations to act out these paradoxes.
Yes. Again, I understood every word she said. I understood the sentences. I sort of understood the meaning of those sentences, but I have no idea what she's talking about. If you have an idea, you have the opportunity in the comments to maybe give me some lights about that, and I would really appreciate that. Maybe that would help me improve my English and my understanding. Let me know what you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Battle Language Guy. Much love.